Hello, my dear students, and welcome to a new episode of biology. Today, we will study the asexual reproduction. The key concept for this lesson is many organisms reproduce by cell division. We have only two main ideas. Number one, binary fission is similar in function to mitosis, and number two, some eukaryotes reproduce through mitosis. So let's start by the first one. Binary fission is similar in function to mitosis. Reproduction is a process that makes new organisms from one or more parent organisms. So reproduction, whether it is sexual or asexual, so this is the process that makes new organisms from one or more parent organisms. Reproduction happens in two ways, sexually and asexually. In sexual reproduction, it involves the joining of two specialized cells called gametes, which are eggs and sperm cells, one from each of the two parents. The offspring that results are generally genetically identical or genetically unique, that they have the mixture of genes from both parents. Again, sexual reproduction involves the joining of two specialized cells called gametes, which are eggs from the female and sperm cells from the male. These are from each of two parents. The offspring that result are genetically unique, genetically identical. They are like new ones. They have a mixture of genes from both parents. In contrast, the asexual reproduction is of the creation of offspring from a single parent and does not involve the joining of gametes. The asexual reproduction do not involve joining of gametes because this is the creation of offspring from only a single parent. The offspring that result from asexual reproduction is genetically identical to each other and to the single parent organism that they came from. Binary fission and mitosis. Most prokaryotes reproduce through binary fission. The prokaryotes, the organisms that have cells that only have cells without nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. So the prokaryotes reproduce through binary fission. So what is binary fission? It's a process, a sexual reproduction of a single-celled organism by division into two roughly equal parts. Binary fission is like the splitting of cells. Binary fission and mitosis have similar results, that both process perform or form two daughter cells that are genetically identical to the parent. Both in mitosis, we already started or studied mitosis, and we knew that the daughter cells are identical to the parent cell. So this is the same for binary fission. However, the actual processes are different in several important ways. So this is the parent cell. When the DNA duplicates, the cell becomes longer. Then it divides into two daughter cells. They are identical to the parent. As you know, prokaryotes such as bacteria do not have a nuclei. Yes, we already know. Prokaryotes do not have spindle fibers. Although they do have DNA, but prokaryotes have much less of it than do most eukaryotes, which have a true nucleus. The DNA of most bacteria is in the form of a single circular chromosome. The DNA of most bacteria is in the form of a single circular chromosome. So it is one chromosome that is circular. Binary fission starts when the bacterial chromosome is copied. Both the chromosomes are attached to the cell membrane. Then, as the cell grows and gets longer, the chromosomes move away from each other. When the cell is about twice its original size, now it can divide. So it undergoes cytokinesis, the same process of the division of the cytoplasm. The membrane pinches inward and a new cell wall forms between the two chromosomes, which completes the separation into two daughter cells, as you can see from the picture. So number one, the cell elongates and the DNA is replicated or copied. Then number two, the membrane pinches inward. And number three, a new cell wall forms separating the two cells. What about the disadvantages and advantages of asexual reproduction? Very often, whether something is helpful or harmful, it depends on the situation. In favorable environments that do not change much, asexual reproduction can be more efficient than sexual reproduction. So when the environmental conditions do not change much, So in this case, the sexual reproduction will be better than sexual reproduction because if the environmental conditions are great or suitable for the organism, then it reproduces asexually to produce the same identical, the genetically identical daughter cells or offspring that will suit to or favor these environmental conditions. Recall that asexual reproduction results in genetically identical offspring if the offspring are well suited to the environment. So genetic variation in this case could be more harmful than helpful. So in this case, the asexual reproduction is favorable. In other words, if it isn't broke, do not fix it. One bacterium can result in a total of 1024 cells after only 10 rounds of cell division. Can you imagine this is in the favorable conditions? One bacterium can result in total of 1024 cells after only 10 rounds of cell division. Look at this diagram. We have the cell division on the horizontal line, or this is the x-axis, and on the y-axis we have the number of bacteria. It increases by time, as you can see from this GIF. However, what are the disadvantages of asexual reproduction? Do you remember the environmental conditions? Asexual reproduction may be a disadvantage in a changing conditions. Genetically identical offspring that come from the asexual reproduction will respond to the environment in the same way. So if the conditions changes, so they will die off. If population members lack the traits that enable them to reproduce, the entire population could die off. In contrast, what about the sexual reproduction in this case? Sexual reproduction increases genetic diversity, yes, because they produce a genetically unique offspring. So again, sexual reproduction increases genetic diversity, which raises the chance that at least a few individuals will survive or even thrive in changing conditions. Keep in mind, however, that the act of asexual reproduction itself is not more efficient, rather, the associated costs of sexual reproduction are greater. What is the meaning of this sentence? This is just that you need to keep in your mind that the sexual reproduction costs a lot because it involves two individuals, not only one. And also, the sexual reproduction involves only one parent or a single parent. For example, all asexually reproducing organisms can potentially reproduce. Yes, suppose that two organisms each have 10 offspring. So if one organism reproduces asexually, all the 10 offspring can have offspring of their own. Each one of them can undergo asexual reproduction and give offspring of their own. But if one organism reproduces asexually, all 10, this is the same, all 10 offspring can have offspring of their own. But if the other organism reproduces sexually, so this means two parents are needed. So having five females and five males, only five females can bear offspring, so the number is reduced. In addition, sexually reproducing organisms must attract a mate. This effort involves not only time and energy needed to find a mate, but also structures, signals, and behaviors that are involved to attract the mate, and this will take too much time and energy and effort. Organisms that reproduce asexually do not have these costs, so they do not to attract a mate or do anything like structures and signals and behaviors. Let's talk about the second main idea in this lesson is some eukaryotes reproduce through mitosis. Some eukaryotes also reproduce asexually through mitosis. Have you ever grown a new plant from a stem cutting like strawberries or potatoes? Or seen a new sea star grown from the arm of another one? These new organisms are the result of mitotic reproduction, and are therefore genetically as the parent organism. So they are identical. This is like mitosis. This is asexually. Mitotic reproduction is especially common in simpler plants and animals. Like what? Mitotic reproduction occurs in both multicellular and unicellular eukaryotes. These are the organisms with cells that have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. The mitotic reproduction can take several forms, like what? Budding, fragmentation, and vegetative reproduction. Let's talk about budding. In budding, a small projection grows on the surface of the parent organism. So this is like a small part or a bud that form on the surface of the parent organism, forming a separate new individual. Then the new organism may be independently live on its own or attached as a part of a colony. Like the hydra, for example. For instance, hydra and some types of yeast reproduce by budding. This is the hydra, and these are the small buds. Also, this is the yeast. This is the parent organism to the left, and the small one, this is the bud, the new one to the right. In fragmentation, this is the second way of mitotic reproduction. In fragmentation, a parent organism splits into pieces, each of which can grow into a new organism. To your right-hand side here, we have the flatworm or the planarians. These worms, even if they are cut into small pieces, each piece will regrow into a new full functional individual. Also, the sea star. Can you see this long arm of the sea star? Actually, this is an old arm that have been cut off another sea star. And all these tiny arms of the sea star, these are the newly grown arms. Flatworms and sea star both reproduce by fragmentation. Many plants, including strawberries and potatoes, reproduce via vegetative reproduction. This is the third way of mitotic reproduction, which is vegetative reproduction. In general, vegetative reproduction involves the modification of a stem or underground structures of the parent organism. Like this one, this is a strawberry plant. The offspring often stay connected to the original organism through structures called runners. For example, can you see these red tubes or red lines? These are stems that lie on the ground. These are called runners. So this is a vegetative reproduction. Many organisms can reproduce both asexually and sexually. Can you imagine this? The form of reproduction may depend on the current conditions. If the current conditions are favorable or suitable for asexual reproduction, then it will be. For sexual reproduction, then it will be. The sea anemone can reproduce in many ways. This is so amazing. The sea anemone, this is an animal that lives in the ocean. It consists of a disc and these tentacles. Sea anemone can reproduce asexually by dividing in half, by breaking off small pieces from its base, or by budding. So dividing in half, breaking off small pieces from its base, or by budding. Sea anemone can also reproduce sexually by making eggs and sperm. Can you imagine? Some species of anemone have males and females. In other anemone species, the same organism can produce both the sperm and egg cells. And this is the end of our period for today. Hope you understood this period. Thank you guys. See you in the next episode and goodbye.